Welcome to Brokers Digest, a weekly webcast by The Edge Singapore, where we discover stock opportunities with you. This episode is made possible by TD Ameritrade Singapore.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Edge Singapore's Brokers Digest with me, Amala Balakrishna. Joining me today is Christopher Brankin, Chief Executive Officer of TD Ameritrade Singapore. Hi Chris, happy to have you with us today.
Hi, good evening. Welcome to the week after the U.S. elections.
Yes, Chris. We have been speaking for weeks on how the U.S. market as well as the different sectors will perform under either a Trump or a Biden administration. So now that Joe Biden has been declared the United States president-elect, how do you feel as an American yourself?
I think, as an American, I would like to see, kind of more of openness across the country. But living here in Singapore for a while, I'm a spectator from the outside in. You saw this interesting turn in the markets, when the votes were actually being tallied. So I think that was something we've never seen it before. So it was, lots of, kind of maybe feelings that maybe people haven't had. There's unprecedented turnout for the election, which is amazing in terms of the number of votes that were received by each one of the candidates. So we saw a lot more engaged, U.S. public, which was, I think, is kind of reflects, in terms of what's going on, not only in the U.S., but across the United States, across the globe anyways.
Yes. That's true. And you mentioned an interesting turn in the markets. And yes, I was very surprised to see that the Nasdaq gained a significant 9% for the week ended Friday, 6 November, while the 30-stock Dow Jones Index was up by 6.9%. And similarly, the S&P 500 jumped 7.3%, which I understand that it's the biggest election week gain since 1932. So I think previously you have also shared with us in our past episodes that markets will face heightened volatility in the lead up to the elections. So are these jumps something that you are surprised by, or were you expecting these? What are your thoughts, Chris?
Well, I think we've talked about this, over the last few weeks. We expected this increase in volatility as we went into this kind of unknown, election period, even though polls were showing Biden, significantly ahead across many states. I think markets didn't truly believe that, and they knew it was going to be a little bit closer than maybe what the polls were showing. So as we've now gotten to this point where, we've had a winner in Joe Biden, is markets are at least taking that in stride. And I think that's really important because now we're at that point, what we talked about, like, are we going to start to see some of the stimulus? We're going to start to see some of the infrastructure spending. Are these things that are going to help, as Joe Biden put it, help to rebuild the soul of America and rebuild the backbone of this nation, the middle class, to make America respected around the world again. So I think that's something that is key to what we're looking at going forward.
Yeah, Chris, because the quote that you just mentioned from Joe Biden, I think many market watchers have said that beating Trump is the first of many challenges that he and his administration will have. And I think just shortly after he was declared the president-elect, one of his first promises was that the U.S. will rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement in about 75 days or so. So how do you reckon this will affect the green and renewable energy industry specifically, Chris?
Yeah, this is an area of focus. So Biden has this ambitious plan for renewable energy in the U.S. The Democratic candidate believes the Green New Deal, as he calls it, powerfully captures two basic truths, which at its core of his plan, the U.S. urgently needs to embrace greater ambition on an epic scale to meet the scope of this challenge. So that's really important. And then number two is our environment and our economy are completely and totally connected. So this is something that as we look at the renewable space, like these two items really kind of hold true, and it's something that we see our customers, have had a focus, and I think that focus is going to be more and more important as we go into the near future.
So, Chris, you say that your clients have had some form of focus in this sector. So what are the counters that you see your clients having an appetite for? Is there anything that you could
I
share?
mean, look, I think one in particular, you've seen more of the headline garnering news lately with Jinko Solar Holdings.
Yeah.
Um, our customers, in TD Ameritrade here in Singapore and across the globe, probably a little more focused on some of the more well-established names. Like First Solar and Power Plug have been some actively traded names in this space, and we've seen an additional kind of uptick in these names, especially now with Joe Biden looking to take over the administration of the United States.
Right. So maybe could you tell us a bit more about these counters and what is so unique about them, and what makes the ones that you just mentioned uh, something that our viewers should consider in the weeks ahead?
Oh yeah. So I mean, look, I mean, it's all about green renewable energy. It's in terms of getting away from the dependence of big focus on parts of the differences between the two candidates is maybe the overall energy space. So as we become a smarter, cleaner, healthier globe, these are things that we see a shift towards, and some of these companies that are putting their focus towards the future, an ambitious type plan. Some of these plans are 10, 20, 30 years out, is how do we get off the dependence, of, non-renewable type energy. So this is where we see more activity for our clients in this space. And I'm not saying that everyone is buying, right now, but with Joe Biden as an administration in office, with the focus being around that, is okay, if they are going to make that more kind of attractive space, this is something that, while we've seen not only our customers, but investors around the globe are taking a closer look at this, because are there areas that are potentially going to go higher because of tax breaks, because of governments taking a more active part. So that's where we see some of First Solar's Power Plug, and then more recently you saw the Jinko Solar Holdings having this big spike because of just all this activity increase into this space.
Right, Chris. So, I just recently came across a 35 stock ETF that tracks the MAC Global Solar Energy Index, as we see over here. So, I understand it comprises multi cap companies from both the US and abroad. So, do you reckon that this is an instrument that our viewers, especially those who are not so familiar with the sectors, can put their money in, Chris?
So this is a great, kind of illustration. So maybe there's a lot of these names in the space that people aren't quite so familiar with, but people are becoming more mindful of the fact it's becoming a top of mind as an investment strategy, or a sector that they would like to have some exposure. So being able to do that through a basket of securities in this ETF is definitely a good way for someone to potentially kind of dip their toe in the water without having so much single stock volatility. So whether it was a First Solar or Power Plug or some other renewables type space, if you're only tied to one stock, sometimes those stocks can have increased volatility, where if you have it in an ETF that has a basket of these currencies that track in terms of the global energy index, this is something that allows you to get exposure across a sector, or an area, within a sector, without having so much, additional volatility linked to one individual counter.
Yep. So, along with the theme of energy, Biden has also promised to ensure that US achieves a 100% clean energy economy, and so that it reaches net zero emissions no later than 2050. So this has raised talk that he may levy stringent emission rules that will affect gas-burning vehicles, and also that he will provide possibly tax credits for the purchase of electric vehicles. So, Chris, how do you think this will affect the big boys like General Motors, Tesla, Volkswagen, Ford Motors? And coincidentally, these are all counters that our viewers have been asking about as well. So, what are your thoughts, Chris?
Look, a nice mix of names you mentioned there. You have some of the old guard, more established, well-known companies, like the General Motors and the Fords of the world. Then you have Tesla, which is, built as a technology type of, build of a car that is different from the combustion, space that has, been around for over 100 years. So two different aspects you look at it. Everyone, Tesla headline garnering, stock moves in terms of what it's done. Elon Musk is in the news often as well. So they're already on that focus of having that clean, renewable type of energy, being able to get away from the combustion type automobile. Now, if you look at Ford and GM, and others in that space, look, they've already begun to pivot away from the way they've done business for 100 years. They already make, electric vehicles. They already do a lot of these things. It's some of the parts, and I think, whether it's GM or Ford or any of the other big auto companies, I think they feel a little bit undervalued from their CEOs saying, hey, look, we make electric cars and we actually make a lot more than Tesla does, and we sell them at a better price point. So interesting space. And it is something that as we go forward, the electric vehicle space, the anything that is, kind of seen as more efficient and less harmful to the environment is an area that is going to be something that clients are focused on. And these big companies, don't be fooled. Like, they are already have years of R&D around this. So if you're looking at in terms of overall valuation, and it's something that potentially you want to hold for a longer period of time, this is something that we do see our customers actively have been trading over the years, has been Ford and General Motors, in that space. And then Tesla has just taken the space by storm, so to speak, on the automotive sector. But it is an area that we will continue to see our clients actively trading in Singapore and across the globe.
Well, I'll definitely be keeping a watch on that. So right now, I'd like to touch on the infrastructure sector, particularly construction and engineering. So Biden has plans to rejuvenate the highways, bridges, and roads, as well as other facilities in the US, as we see over here from his budget that he has shared with the Americans during his campaign. So could you share a bit more about this with us, Chris, as well as if there are any subsectors or counters from this industry that our viewers should keep an eye on?
Well, so this is an area that was part of the focus of the U.S. elections. Was many people thought, no matter who was the winner, is that after the elections were over, that the U.S. could kind of get back on track. And part of that getting back on track, so to speak, was the infrastructure spending itself. Because, that's not only, helping kind of revitalize the economy in the United States, it brings people back to work and all these different things that are part of the overall sector in terms of where we see that strength, how that's impacting the economies going forward. Now, so I think, again, like we talked about in terms of the energy type space, like if you're not as familiar with some of these names, I think there is also an ETF, that we talked about, that is something that you would potentially be able to play in terms around the infrastructure space, as part of Joe Biden and his administration being in office, that would help kind of, as we're kickstarting the economy, if you want to dip your toe in the water and you want to get some additional exposure, I think the ETF, that tracks, infrastructure spend is also an area that we have seen more interest from our clients.
Chris, another type of infrastructure that we have been seeing a lot of interest in is the tech infrastructure space. So Biden has pledged more support for 5G and artificial intelligence. So looking ahead, what does this mean for the big tech infrastructure players like Fastly, for example?
Well, look, this all ties together, with the infrastructure spend as we kind of, get into the 5G era. You have to look at not only like who actually creates, the profits from 5G itself, but who actually, companies like Fastly, companies that are maybe the cell tower infrastructure providers. These people that lease these spaces. That there is a big need and desire for this going forward. I think that is very important as you're looking at the space. Is not only the 5G itself, the infrastructure itself, like what are the different parts that kind of help represent this. And I think Fastly has been something that I think a year ago, most people probably never heard of that stock. That is something that we see not only our customers trading here in Singapore, but we see investors around the globe, actively participating in the stock that, as first-time investors trying to get additional exposure to this space.
Okay, so before we end today's discussion, Chris, do you have any tips or things that our viewers should bear in mind as they trade in the next few weeks, which would possibly be quite volatile?
Well, I mean, for me, it's about the consumer. We're going into, the shopping season around the globe, with, not only from China, but the US. And are we going to start to see, some of that stimulus in the United States? And, once we get that stimulus, we're going to start to see infrastructure. We're going to continue to see trends in the United States start to head better for the economy. If we start to see that, I'm interested to see what happens across the retail space, especially as we get into the Black Friday type of spending period in the U.S. here coming into Thanksgiving holiday.
Oh, yes, that's something that we'll definitely be keeping a watch on in our next few episodes. So, with that, we have come to the end of this week's Brokers Digest. Thank you again, Chris, for taking us through a few of the counters that may possibly see some changes under the Biden administration. To our viewers, we hope these strategies help you in your investment decisions in the short and medium term. For more analysis on how the elections will affect the stock market, you can visit TD Ameritrade's Education Center or the Edge Singapore website. Do also like us on Facebook and Instagram to be alerted on next week's episode. We will be uncovering more insightful investment tips that you won't want to miss. You can also leave us a comment below if there are any questions or topics you would like for us to discuss in our following episodes. I'm Amala Balakrishna, and with me is Christopher Brankin, and we will see you again next week. Take care. Goodbye.